Craig Scholten joined the ABYC team in 2016 as Technical Vice President for over 2 decades. Craig has served on ABYC, IMCI, ISO, NMMA, FUBAR, SNAFU. He's president of the Association of Acronyms, Technical Committees and Boards, and giving him a strong background, just kidding, strong background and knowledge of how the standards and certification processes have evolved. So let's all welcome Craig Scholten of ABYC.
I want to spend my life with you.
Good morning. A bit of a sound check here. Does it sound good back there? Good? All right. Well, glad to be here and give a little awareness of the differences between the minimum federal requirements due, whether they're standards here with ABYC or with ISO. And we'll see if your client's boat does indeed pass the muster. And we're getting no changing of the guard here.
Right. This other side. Right side.
Supposed to be on this screen here. Is it a different controller for this screen?
Cocktail time.
Yeah.
All right, great talk.
There. Whoop, we had it. Now we're there. Just a small disclaimer that this is just, again, a general overview and doesn't replace any actual standards or regulations. Again, if anyone wants this presentation, feel free to give me your card. I can email it to you. Who is ABYC? We're the member organization that writes safety standards here in the States. We're a nonprofit organization. We provide a lot of technical education. There's technicians out there that we certify. So once a boat is built to standards and then gets worked on and repaired, we've got about 4,000 technicians that are certified. They're the Mr. Goodwrenches of the marine industry. So we do a lot of online and classroom training, and the standards are used in the design and construction. We heard a presentation about naval architects before. While we're not dealing with the running surfaces, we're certainly dealing with a lot of other parts of the boat, systems and so forth. There's over 70 standards. They set the bar for safe boating and the customer expectations. They've got a very strong impact on the quality side of things and how things are built, whether it's the components that you see outside here on the tables or the finished boats themselves. They always meet or exceed the federal regulations, and they're used in industry certification programs. Each July a new edition comes out. With the 70 standards, about 15 that get updated every year. So there's always new ones. There's a track changes version so you can see exactly what's changed. Some overview documents that give the builders ideas of what is new and different. And they all have a 1-year transition period from when they're released to when the requirements come in play. Importing in the U.S. At ABYC, we've gotten a lot of calls this past year with a strong U.S. dollar, a lot of foreign builders wanting to know what does it take to bring a boat into the U.S. There must be some special certification. Someone must meet me at the dock and inspect this boat, but there's not. There is no Coast Guard certification for recreational craft. There is no inspection that has to take place at all. You can start building boats and putting them on the market with really nothing to prove to anyone. But there has to be a U.S. Importer. That's the person that is going to go to jail if there's a problem. If there's a safety defect or recall, this person is liable for that product. The Coast Guard does inspect boats. They're at the Miami Boat Show and all the other major events looking for non-conformance. And once you've got a lot of product on the show floor or out in the public and have to do a recall, it can be a very costly affair. The first steps, if you're bringing product into the market, you're thinking about bringing a foreign vessel into the U.S., is you do have to be a U.S. importer with a U.S. address that's responsible. You're going to be required to repair and fix any defects, any recalls. You're going to have to get a MIC code, a manufacturer's identification code. That's how the Coast Guard is going to track that product. The hull number has to be on the boat before it comes in. The MIC is part of that hull identification number. We'll get into that in a minute. And there's a label that you put on the boat to say that it meets all the requirements. This is the federal regulations here. Depending on the boat, whether it's a boat under 20 feet, there's quite a few things to comply with. But if you've got a diesel-powered boat over 20 feet, all you need to comply with for federal law is the boat has to have a serial number and a sticker that says it complies with the law. There's no other requirements on a diesel-powered boat over 20 feet. The fuel system, the electrical system, pretty much is a free-for-all. It's a self-certification, if you will, and no federal law covers all those points. We'll get into that in a bit. Data certification, when you look at those two characters in the serial number, that's the month and year of build. And that's when that builder is saying, I comply with all the laws on that month. November of 2015 on this particular boat, they comply with all the laws in effect on that date. That's his declaration. There is a new requirement now where the states are having to make sure that serial numbers on the boat, the hull identification number, adds up, that those numbers indeed are real and they meet all the coding requirements that are in the CFR. And if they don't, then they send the Coast Guard a notice. Say, I've got a vessel here, the numbers don't add up, it's fraudulent, boat might have been stolen, this manufacturer isn't a U.S. importer, and the state is going to verify now when a boat is registered that that serial number adds up. They're looking for foreign manufacturer codes. There can be two serial numbers on a boat, one with a U.S. dash, that is the one that's issued for the United States. This code at the bottom is one for France, FR. It's not recognized by the U.S. Only the U.S. dash serial number, or just the regular number without the dash, is recognized by the Coast Guard. So if you're importing a foreign product, you want to make sure that they get the right serial number on there. Hot button with the Coast Guard right now, navigation lights. Everyone likes all these accessory lights on their boats. Underwater lights and cockpit lights and exterior lights. Well, if the boat's out on the water all by itself, it stands out. But when it's blended in with 100 other vessels all going in different directions, it confuses boaters. The local Barney Fifes of the world are issuing tickets for this. There are several states now enacting that blue lights on boats are forbidden. And that's coming around. So if you have these lights, many times if you're underway and on water, you are going to get hassled by the local authorities, just depending how they want to flex their muscle, especially if it's a blue light. Coast Guard does have a marine safety alert out on it. So make sure you have switches for those lights so they can be turned off and they aren't any way tied into the actual navigation lights on the boat. Customer presumption of quality and safety. I'm sure the buyers that are building your boats think that there is some rigorous program like they see automobiles being tested on television. Someone's looking out for their safety. But as you can see by that chart, very little is looked at, especially on a diesel-powered boat over 20 feet. We'll look at a few items within ABYC where the standards are really making things consistent and creating a better line of quality out there amongst the builders. First one is electrical. One of the most important ones, one of the more higher warranty claim items you may have on a boat. This E11 standard applies to all AC and DC systems on all boats, regardless of power. Whether it's the electric one we heard of earlier today, obviously diesel, or the federal regs only cover gasoline inboards, nothing more. We heard a little bit about stray current corrosion, and when you have a wire that might get chafed and have a leakage, this ELCI prevents that leakage in the water, trips the breaker. We heard of electric shock in the water where people are swimming. This eliminates that. It doesn't help all the problems with poor dock wiring at the marina itself, but recognizes that imbalance and trips the breaker. That's part of the requirements in E11, as is having a typical GFCI like you'd have in your bathroom at home. That's required in addition to that. Electrical panels, when you wire those up, you have a 12-volt section and you have a 110 section. There's a requirement that that 110 section be separated. This area right here, you have to have a separate cover or box over that, so when someone opens the panel, they can't stick their fingers in there and play with those connections. We're back to not advancing. As simple as having connections inside of a box. You see this in your construction in your homes and businesses, but some foreign-built vessels where they are hooking up all their AC connections, there's no requirement to have all those connections inside of a fireproof box. E11 requires that. Same with connectors. The simple things that are used, wire nuts and Scotch locks and these connections where the wires are pinched right here, the strands are pinched by the set screw. The Coast Guard doesn't address that, and other standards don't. E11 takes care for that, and we see again a lot of fires and other issues that can occur with those kinds of connectors. In this picture here alone, you've got connections that don't have positive boots. You've got a chunk of clothesline holding the battery in place, some wing nuts that'll get loose, a valve here from Home Depot. All of this stuff is going to cause the customer real headaches down the road. None of that is installed according to the standards. Fuel systems, gasoline fuel systems, we cover that on all boats. Whether the tank is fire tested like you see here or all the other components. Again, the CFR only applies to gasoline inboards, and we know how large outboard boats are getting in terms of 40, 50 footers with 5 engines on the back and extreme systems. Those are not covered by the federal regulations. The EPA got involved in our business some years ago, and ABYC worked good with them in not trying to come up with something very erroneous and strenuous that would cause a lot of burden to industry. We've come up with a standard that addresses all the refueling. You now can refuel your gasoline-powered boat like you do your car. The nozzle automatically shuts off. You don't wait for gas to come spewing out the vent to know that it's full. Keeps the fuel out of the water and allows the boat to be able to sit out in the hot Florida sun and not percolate and cause all the fuel to come spewing out the vent. It's a really nice system, works well. We did it within industry without a lot of corporate involvement, and it is working well. Other countries are taking this in. Canada now requires it as well, and Europe will down the road. CARB, they've got nothing's ever good enough. The EPA is never good enough for CARB. California Air Resource Board has to come up with their own. And in 2018 now, before you offer a boat for sale in California, this is gasoline now, you have to get an executive order from CARB before you can sell that boat in California. So there's some awareness for you that might be thinking about selling product there. There's a whole process that you have to go through to get that boat certified in executive order prior to selling it into California. So that's an awareness, and certainly help anyone with that if they get into that. They also have a tag that you have to put on the boat in California warning you of any substances that are on the boat that can cause cancer. This is a nice thing to advertise to the customer going to be buying the boat, that you've got a hang tag on the steering wheel, buy this and you will die. But only in California. Diesel fuel systems, we talked about that. Again, ABYC H33 deals with all the diesel fuel systems and their components and the requirements for those. And again, the CFR, there's no guidance there. There's nothing in the regulation that tells you what to do with a diesel fuel system. Carbon monoxide, this has definitely been something that has been an issue across the nation. And it's becoming now mandatory in some states. Minnesota is one. Others are working on it. Mandatory that when you re-register your boat, you have a CO detector. This again deals with all boats, whether it's gas, electric, diesel, sailboat. You may raft up and moor with someone who has a generator running, and you have your hatch open, and you may not wake up the next day. This is where that CO detector comes in. The technology of those are much better today. The nuisance alarms and the draw on the boat's battery is nothing like it used to be. They're pretty robust these days. Upper deck capacities. H5 requires that if you've got an upper deck. It's not necessarily a person capacity, but a weight capacity. There's been a number of accidents over the years where on a 4th of July fireworks, there's way too many people on that upper deck and it's caused a problem. H5 now requires that you placard that upper deck with a weight. Powering of boats. Again, ABYC deals with all boats, including catamarans. CFR only deals with monohull product under 20 feet, so very limited. And as we know, the trend of the industry is more power. Got to have it. So certainly we'll deal with all of those issues in horsepower. Seacock through hulls and fittings, we've heard about various leaks. Again, the CFR does not address seacocks, the quality of them, how they're installed, if they have to be tested or not. where ABYC H27 takes care for all that. There's strength tests that are done as installed. You're putting a 500-pound load on there, so whatever person is down in the build standing on the seacock, it isn't going to crack and damage that. It passes the test. So there's requirements for those as installed. Reboarding means ladders, handholds, again, not covered by the regulation at all. If you have occupant positions on the boat, you have to have a place for them to sit down and hang on, and they have to meet a pull test. They can't be just installed with a number 8 screw. You've got to put them in with something that's robust, that's going to hold up, and when you get in a panic situation and you're pulling on those handles, they comply they for years down the road. Remember, you're responsible for that product as an importer 10 years from the date of manufacture. Same with gates. You don't have to have a gate, but if you have one, it's a false sense of security if it's only held in there with chewing gum and rubber bands. You need to make sure that it's held up to that 400-pound test again, outward. Reboarding, that's got to be in your owner's manual. You have to show how you're going to reboard the boat. This again is a requirement on CE certified boats. This just came about for them in the last year. Seems simple, but various court cases and things have been lost because people had no way to get back on the boat. That ladder rung now has to be 22 inches down in the water, so even your mother-in-law can get back on board the boat. Water systems. Water systems are covered at all by the federal regulation. Again, ABYC has standards for the quality of the components that are used, how they're installed, how it can be drained, and so forth. Also with water heaters, there's been a number of cases that occurred where people have that's tied into their engine cooling. Engine overheats. Now the water is much hotter than it should be. Someone's going to take a shower on the swim platform and gets burned. So now there is a tempering device that's installed, and that will temper the water and keep people from getting scalded with water from the onboard heating system. As well as if the water heater blows its relief valve, it's a drain that goes overboard. So if the boat's unattended and it's hooked to city water and it runs and runs and runs, that water goes overboard and doesn't flood the boat. And as simple as if you've got a raw water washdown and you're not supposed to be drinking from it, then you need to tell people that, hey, don't drink out of this faucet, as simple as that may be. And all these examples on the screen all come from situations that have occurred. We have influence from the surveying industry on our standards development, also from insurance companies, from the Coast Guard, and these are all real-world situations that have evolved over time as how you see these requirements increase and try to build a better product. LPG systems, again, quite popular, especially on the larger product you're dealing with, but again, the federal regulations don't address them at all. It's a free-for-all where A1 covers all the storage and all the components and where they're installed and how it vents, and don't use the locker where you have your LP tank to store all kinds of other equipment and tools and things of that nature. It covers all that in detail. Galley stoves, whether you have a stove or an actual wood burner that's on this boat, we cover all of that. So there's guidance of when you're installing those stoves and equipment on a boat. Because you don't want that. You don't want a fire. But if you do have a fire, there's requirements to keep curtains and other things around, flammable, from the headliner and the materials that you put around that stove and everything, so that is out of harm's way. So you don't have the chance of that flare-up fire causing the rest of the boat to become engulfed in flames. There's requirements on hatches, port lights, and windshields. There's no requirements in the CFR for that, whether it's safety glass or the size of the hatch themselves, where they're located, strengths for when the rope gets jammed and caught in the hinge. There's all kinds of strength requirements and installation requirements that keep all that working well. As if you did have a fire, you need a readily accessible place, a second means of escape. So if you have that set up in the boat, the standards deal with that and allow you a path and a way out of the boat. How do I keep track of all this, you wonder? There are so many requirements. How is anyone going to know? We have an audit tool. It's a breakdown. There's 1,200 pages of technical bliss in this book right here. And I've broken that down into 18 pages of you shall. You shall support the wires every 18 inches. You shall not do this. Those are all labeled in this checklist. And where there's a blue highlight, there is a test that should be done. The manufacturer should have done a test on the seacock for strength. They should have pulled on the handle. They should have checked that out. So those of you in the crowd that are involved in design work and you're designing boats, you can use this as a checklist to help you design to comply rather than trying to, oh man, didn't think of that, and the boat's now built, getting ready to be delivered. If you're surveying boats, if you're an insurance company, this is all the things in that book that tell you what to do. If you're a member, you can download that right from our store. It's free of charge for ABYC members, and that is out there as a tool for you to use to do an audit on the product and see how you measure up to the standards. That stays current every year with all the additions that come out. We're going to move on into Europe now and CE certification. You may hear a lot about that. CE certification is mandated in Europe. It's requirement. And there are some things that you still need to do bringing a boat into the US even though you have CE. And we'll go through some of that. But they have to ensure their products are designed to the requirements, the law. They have to draw up a technical file. They have to show that they've done their homework. They have a special declaration of conformity. It's a legal document that when they go to the Secretary of State, their version of it, they have to bring this declaration to show and prove that the boat company has built the boat to all these different requirements. We have an MSO here, nothing that we have to do to prove that. There's a special CE mark obviously goes on the boat, keeping that documentation for 10 years, again, lawsuits and things of that nature, and make sure that the product stays in conformity. You might have built a boat 10 years ago and you're going to build another one. You can't build to the old requirements, the old designs. You have to build to the latest rules that are on the street. And that's true here in the US as well, and that date of certification and the serial number we talked about. And you have to have an owner's manual as well. There's some new things that this Recreational Craft Directive, RCD2, came about. And that is, they too in their country, whether it's Germany or France, and you have to be able to reboard the boat, something we've done here for some time. And then there's a requirement for the actual city and country on this builder's plate. This does not say that the boat meets Coast Guard requirements. That's a separate label that has to be on the boat, but that's their version of a certification label. And toilets no longer can go directly overboard, something we don't do here in the States, but now in Europe that is got to go to a holding tank or treatment system as well. And their gasoline inboard engines have to comply with the EPA. All your Mercury Volvo stern drives that have catalyst on them now, they have to have the same in Europe. Canada's also included in that. So if you've got someone that wants to take a boat from the US, you may have someone here on holidays, and they're thinking, I want to bring this boat back to Europe with me. Now that this new directive is in place, that engine has to be a clean burning engine. It has to meet the EPA requirements. So I get this call quite frequently, sometimes with the customer already having this used boat sitting in customs in Europe, wanting that magic declaration of conformity. Can't give it to them because the engine doesn't comply. So if you get involved with wanting to bring used vessels into Europe, it's gas powered or diesel, because Tier 3 is required now in Europe too. The propulsion engine could be a big problem with that. Generators, believe it or not, aren't covered, just the propulsion engines. So be careful with wanting to take a boat from here and sending it to Europe unless it's a newer model. Could get you in trouble. This declaration of conformity that I talk about is an itemized list of all the requirements that the builder declares he complies with. And you have to do that to the most current one. Stability and buoyancy, for example, that Naval Architect's going to be testing that. 2017 is the most current version of that. And how you know that is from this journal. The European Union puts out a journal of what's most current, and they look at that date in that serial number and when that product was put on the market, and they look at this list, they know what the most current standard is that that boat should have been built to. Guess what? If you're a builder and you're still using an old standard, that boat gets to Europe and there's an accident, you created this declaration, there's going to be some high cost to pay for building a boat to an old requirement when all this information in the EU's mind was clear and available. You should have been building to a more current standard, and from a liability standpoint, you can find yourself in some real trouble. ISO standards are available on the ABYC library. They're there and online for you to look at. Yeah, that's another member benefit we have. And our involvement with ISO is increasing. Myself, when I came on board with ABYC, that was one of my tasks, was to try to harmonize the requirements here in the US, whether it's the component builders or the boat builders, trying to build a boat one way for the world and be able to sell it anywhere. And that's the goal we're trying to work towards. Not reinvent the wheel. Right now, steering wheels is one that I'm involved with. Steering wheel, steering system. So when we deal with the C-Star Solutions of the world and U-Flex and the other hydraulic systems out there, hybrid systems, we're trying to design and build steering systems and test them one time and be able to have a CE mark and an ABYC certification and be able to sell them anywhere in the world. So that's what I'm tasked with trying to do, is trying to harmonize that and make that easier for industry to be able to build and sell product around the world to one set of requirements. Some differences, again, one I'll use is electrical. That is probably the one we see the most differences on. Conductors, the size of the conductor, the type of conductor, what we're used to buying here in the States, readily available, boat cable, don't exist there in many places. So the types of wire they're using, you might find the same color wire throughout the whole boat, having no idea what it goes to. Everything's red. And I'm seeing the guys nodding their heads up and down the side here. They've all experienced that. Panel boards, obviously the frequency, access to connections, voltmeters, the receptacles, you know, an ELCI they do not have generally, or GFCIs in the boat themselves. Bonding systems, we talk about cathodic protection. That seems to be a downfall in a number of European products. Corrosion seems to be greater on some of that product. They don't have a habit of wanting to connect that green wire to the boat's 12-volt ground. So if they get a ground fault, a battery charger, the wire wears on the case and they get voltage going to the system, there's no way to ground that. Things are energized, and that's when things are going to start to percolate in the water and cause you problems. And again, the fuel systems, they're not there. The next round of the directive is supposed to be there on gasoline fuel systems. CO detectors aren't mandatory. They're not covered at all. Freshwater systems is an example of something that is a free-for-all, as well as we heard a lot about high water bilge alarms and those systems. Again, not mandatory, no standards for it, nothing covered there at all. From an insurer's point of view, I know we may have a few insurance people in the room. Some builders go above and beyond voluntary standards. They want their product and their reputation to be higher than any other brand out there. They want to be a top quality builder. And it probably could be agreed to that the buyers don't know, don't care. They assume someone's looking out for their safety. They have no idea that there isn't requirements for that. But they are in other building areas, whether it's your car or your home, but not so much in boats. But the standards have improved the longevity of boats, the quality of the product, and how it retains its value. A product that is built to the standards and one that might be certified, definitely when you look in the books, they hold their value better than others. And what you'll find with some insurance brokers is they'll have a history with a brand or a model based on accidents, lawsuits, and they just simply won't insure that product at all. When are standards not voluntary? Well, again, when that customer has that perception of safety and quality. We know that the government regulations will definitely increase without these voluntary standards programs. We work closely with the Coast Guard. They sit on these technical committee meetings, and because we can address those things in usually a one-year cycle, otherwise it takes literally an act of Congress to change the federal regulation and get those safety standards updated. Customers are very concerned with the quality, the ease of use, and the environment. And then today, with the systems that are out there, wireless controls and so many different things talking with one another, if there aren't standards to make sure this device isn't talking to this device to the other device, because you'll be driving your boat soon with one of these, we need standards for that. And they have a big influence on, again, the valuation and stability and the service. We train the Mr. Goodwrenches of the marine industry, and you may go ahead and design and build a boat to comply, but then Harry's Marine Service has hired Billy Joe, Bob, that doesn't only know how to work on heavy equipment, and he starts taking shortcuts in installing systems and accessories on your boat. It's now a compliant boat is soon not compliant any longer, and that's what we're trying to do. We've got a high school curriculum now where we're trying to bring in people from the high school level to be able to get excited about working on boats, and that's a program that's going into a lot of career tech centers around the industry to teach them about marine repair. Finally, I got a slide here that just shows registered vessels compared to deaths. As you can see, the number of registered vessels increases and has increased, while the number of deaths when it was at a peak in '71 has continued to go down. There's been no new regulations from the federal government, one minor one that I can think of, since 1971. So obviously, it's clear to us in the standards writing world and the application of them and the certified technicians that with the number of registered boats going up and the deaths going down, voluntary standards are doing their job in the business place. People are concerned with building a quality product, reliable product, safe product, and that keeps the standards always new and the best technology out there to build product with. So hopefully I've got us somewhat back on time. Any questions? Yeah, it's a lot to swallow. Again, more of an awareness if you didn't know. And again, this presentation is available to anyone that would like it. Give me your business card. I can email it to you.
You're talking about exporting a boat to Europe from the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a rough year where that you would have to worry, like below 2,000 or?
Yeah, be January of 2017. January 2017, that build date that we talked about in the serial number. If you have a product that was built prior to that, you really want to make sure that it has an engine that will comply with their emission requirements, which we phased in 2012. The EPA got involved with that and even earlier. So you want to make sure you have a compliant propulsion engine, as after that date, they're going to require that declaration of conformity. Most builders will give you that declaration, even if it's been lost, they'll redo one, but their hands are tied if it was built too early and doesn't have an engine that complies. And then there's, unless you want to replace the propulsion engine, the boat builder's hands are pretty well tied.
As far as an individual importer, not a hello. As far as an individual importing a vessel from a smaller boat, let's say a 30 to 40 foot boat from France, let's say, is there, the Coast Guard requires that there is a U.S. stamped HIN number?
Correct.
Regardless of whether it's an individual or whether it's a dealer?
Yeah, this is a new product that's coming in.
Yeah, so if brand new boats and it's FR, right, in the 12 digits, that's non-compliant. What are the penalties for bringing that in without the proper?
Like everything's cool until you get caught.
Yeah.
Exact penalties, I'm not sure. The fines, and they would certainly work with you on a case-by-case basis, whether you were bringing in one boat, as you say, or you were bringing in thousands of some inflatable boat that now has all over the market, and there's people having problems with them sinking and drowning, and it's probably a case-by-case. But yes, everything that's coming into the States is supposed to have someone responsible for it, someone that's willing to go to jail for that product, registered with the Coast Guard.
I can tell you that from personal experience, I was bringing some boats in from Spain, and I reached out to ABYC. Craig was actually the gentleman who came down and did an audit or a survey on the boat to see that the boat was ABYC compliant. And one of the things that escaped me was that it said ES and then had the 12-digit number on there. And Craig picked that up, and what we did is we had them reissue an MSO with a US number on it, and I put a plate on the back of the boat that just gave the same number because they used their coding the same as ours, but did it with US. And then all the boats that came in after the fact were done that way. So, as a practical application, ABYC isn't a daunting group that's going to come in and condemn your boat.
No,
They really gave me a lot of great input and advice. I think some of those pictures up there were pre-correction pictures that you may have taken. Yeah, because wire connectors were not the best.
Yeah, we're not the police. Definitely, we are not the police. We are available as an organization to help you understand the requirements, look at product, see where you measure up. Again, there's been a number of cases that have been lost in the courtroom lately where the builder has not done their due diligence. They haven't done the testing. They haven't had a good technical file. They haven't been able to prove to the jury that they've done their homework. And there's been a towboat manufacturer that lost a $30 million case just because this boat has this capacity. Did you test it with that capacity? No.
Greg, thanks so much. It was great information.
All right, thank you.